Every day, you essentially pay your dues by doing the harder thing when it's the right thing to do. All right, Pete, my friend, how are you? It's good to finally face-to-face connect.
Nice to meet you. I'm good, thanks. I'm good.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here, and I think there are a lot of exciting things to cover. Not to spoil any future or past episodes, but Will is a connection, which ironically, I literally just recorded the podcast with him.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Got a lot to get from him.
Absolutely, man. And so, yeah, I think this is a great opportunity to, I'm selfishly just trying to pick the brains of, honestly, people that are probably smarter than me in gymnastics and try to just share that information across the world. So I would love to maybe chat about some of your background, how you got to where you are, what you're doing now, and then dig specifically into vault. You know, vault, I think, is on the men's side something a lot of people struggle with to, get high level vaulting. And so I'd love to kind of dive down those rabbit holes if you're okay with it.
Of course, yeah. Fire away.
So let's start with that. Let's start with, your quick little overview path to your gymnastics background and kind of where you got personally, and then how that led you to, the coaching that you're doing right now.
That's a really quick one. Nothing. I didn't do gymnastics at all. I'd done a little bit when I was in school. My background is martial arts.
Okay.
So I was doing, I was coaching, and I was also training to quite a high level. There used to be some competitions when we had to do a gymnastic element. So I went along to my nearest gym and said, "Can you teach me an element? It needs to be a tuck back or a flippy thing." So I taught. They tried to teach me how to do a free cartwheel. Within 3 weeks of that, my men's coach left, and they'd asked me to condition them. So they asked me if I could do just some basic conditioning with a group of like little guys. They were between 8 and 10, and they were very low level. So I said, "Yeah, I can do that." Training in martial arts is a little bit different to gymnastics. Martial arts, you do it yourself. So if it's conditioning, you're at the front and you're showing off. You lead by example. Here now, I'm lucky. I can support and I can do my thing while I drink coffee, and everything's great. But there, it's a little bit different. So we started to train on those ones. After about a month, they said, "Would you like to go on a course so you can kind of know what you're talking about?" I said, "Yeah." So I went on the course. It was with a very good guy called Paul Hall. So he taught me quite a lot of stuff going along the way. Within a month after that, unfortunately, I prolapsed the disc in my back. So I couldn't do martial arts anymore. I couldn't train. I couldn't lift people. I couldn't demonstrate. Yep. So I could, however, still stand in the corner and tell kids what to do and, make fun games, enjoy ourselves, do everything else. So that's how I got actually into the main aspect of it. I then stayed at that gym for 7 years as a volunteer. And then after that, I made the decision to move and go to another gym. So it meant an hour and 15 minutes in the car every day to get to gym, an hour and 15 minutes back again. But it was a purpose-built facility, and it's, I think, one of the best in the country. So that's how I kind of got into it.
That's amazing. Not to jump in, but there's something I noticed, which is my coach seems like Will's backstory, your backstory, Nick Ruddick's backstory is not the best gymnast, but just with the curiosity and desire to learn, just became phenomenal coaches. And I love that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's good. I don't think sometimes, definitely having a background in gymnastics, knowing all the elements, knowing what they are. For me, it was hard to teach pummel and to teach rings. If you can't do a double leg circle or anything, to understand that and where to push, where to pull, when to go is quite tricky. For me, if I understood it biomechanically, then I was okay. It's my favorite thing. Or if I could support it. So parallel bars was great for me. High bar, great for me. Vault, I understood it well once I understood floor. The ones that came later to me were things like rings and pummel, yeah. So it's a little bit tricky on that one. But I don't think you have to be an amazing gymnast to be a good coach. I think you can be a good coach and not ever having done gymnastics before.
That's great. And I would love to ask you the same question I asked Will, which is, you make it sound so easy, which is, I took some rec kids and then I learned this and this, and voila, here I am. It's like, knowing a lot and teaching courses. So are there things that you find are very important you see in yourself or other coaches to continue to gain levels and kind of escalate up maybe the difficulty tier of teaching high level gymnastics?
I just have a few golden rules, if I'm honest. For me, there has to be some clear goals for the gymnasts and also for us. So what are we doing? Why are we there? Are we just in it because we enjoy coaching kids? It's a 1 hour fun class. Are you aiming to move more county level, more regional level, going up the the tier? Our goal for everybody is also to produce an Olympian. That was my goal after I was coaching for about 10 years. I thought, I'd love to be able to do this. What story it would be for somebody that's never done gymnastics before to be able to produce something to that level. So I think that you have to have some clear goals. Remembering it's their gymnastics. So, you leave your ego at home, you check it in at the door. we go in, we're there to, help them be the best gymnast that they can be. I love people watching all the time at competitions. I love sitting in the crowd. I don't watch some of the gymnastics. I just like to see how the coaches are going. Do they get like a big high five when they come off? Is the coach upset, pulling out their hair? What's going on with that? So that's something else that, I think that we need to do. Checking your intensity as you go throughout the session, from week to week, and especially when it comes to a comp build up. These kids feed off us. We are like their example. So if we remain quite calm, then they remain quite calm. The bit that I feel like I can be laid back. I know what I need to do. I've got it all sorted out in my mind. In a competition, I think that a competition is definitely about getting the gymnasts at ease, letting them settle down. They have to be able to stand there, and we've done all of that build up. So at that moment in time, we don't need to worry about that. We need to settle them down so they're actually used to getting into their rhythm. And then just make time for yourself. That's the other thing that I've learned. I coached to a high level. I didn't have a holiday in 7 years. And sometimes, it's hard because you want so much out of these gymnasts, but remembering that they're still young. So we need to try to make time for ourselves, our family time, and then everything gets on. If not, lots of people talk about coaching burnout. I think that if we're in the gym more than what the gymnasts are, and we want it more than what the gymnasts do sometimes, and it's a little bit like a horse race with these kids. One kid will get a little bit higher than the other one. And when that's regionally, or if that's, between two clubs, that's great, I think, because that competition spurs us on a little bit more. But, we have to have an idea of where we're going with it.
So many really good points. I want to kind of pull the threads on there and dive deeper. The first being is, the clear goals piece, which is, I think sometimes the most friction that I see occur when I consult with teams or federations or whatever is coach has one goal, parent might have another goal, gymnast goal changes as they get older. Maybe it was Olympics, elite, fantastic, amazing. And it's like, I kind of want friends. I kind of want this, or vice versa. When they're younger, they're like, I just like gymnastics for fun, but they get a little higher and like, no, I want to go real high level. And so can you maybe speak to how to navigate aligning those goals? Because it can be a lot of friction.
Yeah, I think, continue having the good conversations with parents. I try not to, whenever I do like coaching courses, I say that it can't be like a corridor talk. Make time to actually sit down with them and say, what are your goals? This is what I can offer for you. And we need to be honest with these people. We don't want to be saying, yes, I can do this. I'll turn your son into the next Olympian. You need to be honest with what their strengths are. Where are they going? What do they want to be? Have they got any other things in life? Over here, quite a lot of the time when kids get to around about 8, they're into football. If we manage to keep them for a few years after, and that's amazing, then same sort of thing comes out when around 12, 13. That's when they start to get hard for them. So we need to make sure that we consistently check in with the parents. This is where they're going. This is what they're doing. If they want a meeting about that, as I said, then we arrange a meeting, we sit down and we can actually thrash out a few things. But being honest with the gymnasts and also being honest with, with ourselves, really, that's a massively important thing, I think.
Yeah. And to that point, it leads to the second one naturally you mentioned, which is it's their gymnastics, right? And I know a lot of coaches are sometimes fearful of those really, uncomfortable conversations when someone's 12, 13, they're getting new ideas, maybe friends, maybe football, maybe whatever. And they might make a decision where gymnastics was fun when I was 8, 9, 10, but I kind of want to move on. And I feel as though that's where something gets a little sticky. Whereas if a coach is too attached in terms of like self-esteem, or they're not letting it be their gymnastics, everyone starts to move on to other things and they're offended. When in my mind, I view that as like, that's amazing. You know what I mean? Like, of course I want them to be happy and do whatever they want. But some gymnasts, of course, will stay and they become like so much more self-motivated by, I know I love this. This is my gymnastics. I'm pursuing my own goals. I don't think you can't push anybody anywhere. You know what I mean? You can't force anyone to do anything. And I think that's a hard realization for many coaches.
Definitely is. Sometimes you just need to understand that they're in it just because they enjoy it. And when that enjoyment starts to go, they could be our next best judge. They could be our next best coach. So over here, we've got quite a good mentoring system. So they can start to actually do courses called a young leader when they're around about 12 years old. So they can get to come into the gym when they're 14, they can do a coaching course. So it's great. But that's what we need to think. Just because they don't want to be training anymore, they might be able to help the next generation of kids come through. And I'm a firm believer of they are the best coaches. Without these amazing coaches that produce tiny little 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds, they're not going to pass through our system to come to the high performance coach to be able to do all these things, or college gymnastics in the States.
Mm. And I love that, right? Because I have definitely noticed that as the sport has become more complicated, we need more people from different arenas, just coaches, right? Some of the best former gymnasts that I met who moved on maybe in high school became the best physios for gymnastics. They
Mm.
love gymnastics still, but they went to physio school or they became a strength and conditioning coach, or like you said, a judge or a coach. Like there are so many opportunities for someone to stay inside the sport and do what they find passion they love, but not be specifically a coach. And I think like as the sport gets more complicated, we need all those people, not just technical coaches, but everybody supporting the athlete, you know?
Definitely. And what a great story it is to be able to say that we were coaching this kid for 4 years and then they moved on to weightlifting and now they're so incredibly good. I coached in a gym called Europa in London. And
Mhm.
we actually used to have a ballet room where quite a few gymnasts were. They went over to the ballet side of it. And we also used to have a powerlifting studio, and that's where Zoe Smith was from. So she was a gymnast, and the guy used to come in and talent spot these guys and say, "Oh, she's good. You know, she can do these elements and these patterns." And at the end of her gymnastics career, she went over there and then she went to Commonwealth Games and leaned on to much bigger and better things. But it's
Amazing.
such a big platform to go to.
Mm. And I think with that being said is like, you know, it's so cool, like you said, to have that story of someone who kind of has a rocket ship from gymnastics. It was their foundation. It was, you know, that kind of rises the whole sport as a whole, right? Which is, you know, people can start in gymnastics, they can stay, they can go to the elite level if they want, they can go to university, or they could just do their 4 years and move on and find something else they love. And what an awesome place to have a common bond from. You know, like, oh, I started gymnastics when I was young and I found weightlifting. And then, you know, I went to university for weightlifting and now I'm a weightlifting coach. And I love it. You know, that's awesome.
That's it. And they'll always remember, you know, these guys will always remember if they see you in the street, you know, you were the guy that done this, that, and the other, and you helped me and so forth. You know, it's such a powerful thing being a coach, I believe. It doesn't matter what it is, even if they're just with you. My thing always is I want to be able to support them the best I can support them. I need to be able to like nurture them through their either gymnastics or their growth or any problems coming along. Because we do spend more times with these kids normally what their parents do. By the time they leave school and then come straight to us, they're with us, 4 hours if they're an
Mm.
elite gymnast. So we need to think that we have quite a long, you know, impression on these guys. So if
Mm.
they're going to be able to do that and then move on, I'd like them to enjoy them session. Hopefully they get something from my time with me. And then when they do part, you know, it's always on good terms. So it's on a great thing. So in terms of if we're knowing that they're not enjoying it, consistently checking in with these guys on how you're doing, what you're doing. It looks like you're not happy, you're not really enjoying things. What's going on? Help me out.
Mm.
And I think a lineup at the beginning, at the end of the session is a great way to figure that out. You know, you find out some amazing things. Maybe they're tired, so you need to ease off the session and ease off them a little bit. Maybe they've had a really good day and they're buzzing. You're like, well, today's the day you're going to catch that catch if. Come on, let's
Mm.
go. So
Mm.
it's quite a good thing. It's a powerful thing, powerful bond, I believe.
I couldn't agree more. And I want to kind of double click on what you said about the, you know, maybe they're not in love with it anymore. And I want to go back to that concept of coaching burnout. I myself for sure had some periods where I was really burnt out in coaching. And I think after the pandemic and kind of the industry of gymnastics right now is a lot more people are finding themselves a little burnt out, exhausted. They're not
Mm.
quite as in love as they were. And I get a lot of messages from coaches saying like, you know, my gym or the environment's not the same, or I'm just not feeling it anymore. And I'd love to maybe hear your thoughts on, you know, let's first start with why do you think coaches maybe go through that burnout? I have my thoughts, but I'd love to see, you know, what you believe.
I think quite a lot of the times, as I said, like if their values sometimes, or with you know where they're going, what do they want to do? Quite a lot of the time, you know, as I said, we've all got like this impression of where we want to go as a coach. Mine, when I was younger, never was. I'm a different coach. I've probably changed my coaching style of like 101 times. But knowing what your goals are and why you're there. If your goal is always to try to go to Olympics and you're working with 8-year-olds, then that's a very long thing to think about. So sometimes some people get fed up with that. Sometimes a change is good. Quite a lot of the time, we're so invested in these things and our calendars are so full. We've got this competition and we've got this national squad and then it's this trial and this. We're in the gym all the time and there is no time for us to have holidays to ourselves. And sometimes, without knowing it, I feel like we reflect a little bit and we kind of like, we don't hold it as a grudge. But, you know, we want it sometimes more than what the gymnast does. The gymnast wants to be able to come and enjoy their stuff, think about that competition, and then have a bit of a break. Whereas we're going, oh, you can do that, but we've then got this competition. And if you take this
Mm.
2 weeks off and everything else, it's quite hard. When I
Mm.
first started coaching, I knew what I was doing in terms of coaching. I know how to coach. I know how to bring the best out of people. I think I've had some fantastic mentors going through my time in Barry Colley and good friends with Eddie Van Hoof and Lee Walls and everybody else. And I know how to do that. But the bit sometimes that I wasn't good at was when to ease off them a little bit. I was consistently going this, and sometimes I was like, well, let's not do that. Sometimes we used to do a competition 2 days later in the gym, and I learned, well, rather than just say to have 2 days off, 3 days off, your transition period, whatever it is, it's different for everybody. Bring them in, have an easier, lighter session, maybe play a game at the end, do something, enjoy that rather than being so intense all the time throughout it. So that's one aspect, I think. The other bit was COVID did hit everybody hard. And that at that aspect, when we were building up, some kids had never done a competition, and then they come back a year and a half, 2 years later, and they were on it, and they had no experience. And that was also really, really hard for us. Over here we weren't allowed to support them. We had to wear masks, and that was quite hard for us, especially if people, needed to be supported or guided or something along those things. So that was quite tricky for us, also, I believe. We just need to remember, what is the goal?
Yeah.
Be honest with yourself. That long drive, I done it for 7 years. That long drive home was amazing because I had an hour when I was by myself and I could just reflect and go, well, why couldn't he do that? And sometimes I was so caught up on the moment, why couldn't he do that? It was like something like, well, why, what did I do? Should I have eased off him a little bit and gone, okay, when you can see him struggling, he's failed 3-4 attempts. Rather than say, well, we're here for another 20 minutes. I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you 2 more goes. See if we can do it in 2 more goes. And if not, we're going to come back to this later on because this was so good. You always make a good thing out of something.
That's great. Well said. And I love that self-reflective point. I can, piggyback on that and saying that I think my sense of burnout and what I see in other coaches, one is I very much, was attaching my sense of self-esteem, like almost as a human, to the performance of my athletes that I was working with. Right. And for me, a big progression was decoupling my sense of self-esteem and my, like worthiness, I guess, as a person, not to the waxes and wanes of a gymnast performance. Like if we had a lot of athletes who made nationals or went this level and got a great score, I was like, oh, this is great. But if the team wasn't doing well and people were kind of having a rough patch, I was like feeling bad about myself personally. So I found that decoupling my sense of self-esteem and kind of taking a step back to your point, which is like, well, why am I here? I'm doing this because I enjoy helping the kids and I want to help them grow and develop and keep them in the sport. And, if we get gymnastics along the way, that's great. And that really took a lot of pressure off my shoulders. And to that second piece you mentioned is having pretty clear work boundaries, like I'm working these hours and I'm doing this, but I want to have other hobbies. I want to go do other things. I want to have other interests, right? Like if you just spend all your time in the gym nonstop all the time, it's really hard to have anything else outside the gym and you're just at the mercy of the way the waves swing, So that's my 2 cents. I'm not sure if any of that resonates with you.
No, it does definitely in terms of it. Like, but we sometimes, and this is like, it's not an ego aspect, I think, but quite a lot of the time when we are there, and as you say, they do so well, and you're standing there, and we go to this competition, they win these medals, and we are high, and it's amazing, and then you have like a little come down when you're like, oh, I'm back to the gym, I'm teaching 4 drills, or this person isn't in for rec tonight, so you have to coach it. You're like, right, brilliant. But there's lots of times, we're going to go up and down, up and down, up and down. But remembering that, once again, it's their gymnastics. It's not our gymnastics. We're pretty much along for the ride, and we're going to help them out as much as we physically can. So not to feel bad if somebody falls off beam, falls off bars, they didn't do that on purpose. There's no point in us getting angry about that or having some sort of attitude about that. We need to build them up for the next piece. And then in 3, 4, 5 days later, we'll discuss, what happened there. Maybe it's a simple fact is that they hadn't been doing their program as much as we liked it. Leads on to other conversations, was the program too hard? Would you like to change something? So, yeah, I just think, remembering it's their gymnastics, it's their accolades, and we're there to support them. And we can't support them if we're in a temper about something, or if we've got some feelings about it ourselves.
Sure. That idea that you can be super passionate, but not dependent, right, on it, right? You can be biggest coach, biggest cheerleader, be really excited and want it just as much, right? I view this as like a group connection towards a common goal. Like you're in a joint partnership towards a common goal you both have, and you can be fired up and excited about it, but it doesn't mean you have to be dependent on that for your sense of happiness and self-esteem. Of course, it comes and it goes. Disappointments happen. That's a passionate coach. But yeah, I think there's a very clear line there between needing it and being excited about it,
Yeah, definitely.
And then moving on to that, I think I'd be remiss to not dig into technically. I feel like people love the macro for session, but they want to understand some bits and pieces about specific apparatus. So I'd love to maybe pivot the conversation and talk specifically about your thoughts on vault, because I know that's kind of a topic you're going to be sharing some information on for the symposium. So I'd love to maybe start with just at a high level, like what do you think goes into making high level vaulters? Is it power? Is it technique? Is it, just this relentlessness of power that just somehow is God given? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it changes as they go through. I mean, if you could say what would be the attributes to an amazing vaulter, is like spending lots of time on it, spatial awareness. Like my favorite things in life, doing some running drills, So, but lots of people, like, they try to push them on too far. You know, they're a tiny little guy, a little girl, and they're trying to get over a vault that's 1m10, 1m20. It's bigger than them. So take the fear out of it. Let's get them running. Let's get them hitting the springboard properly. Lots of plyometrics drills, lots of things when they're going to be able to jump, you know, from high level things. We need to get their bodies ready. We have got the power aspect. Yeah, they need to be able to run down the vault run, be as fast as they can 2 minutes before a springboard, and they need to get off it in handstand. The way that you're going to go around that is different things. Yeah, we can use lots of slopes off the tumble track, lots of springboards. I do lots of trampoline works. They're used to being spatial aware. They sound, they know where they are. Picking the right vault for these guys. So if somebody's, you know, not that great at going backwards, then you really wouldn't want to be teaching them Yurchenko when they're young. When they're older and they understand that pattern of movement a lot better, then that's excellent. But if they prefer to go forwards, let's do things along the lines of Yamashitas. These vaults will then build up to doing things like our Kazamatsus, our soups, our port runs, and everything else. So in terms of, like I love running drills, and I love a good handstand bounce. And the main things for me when they're younger. After that, it's playing. Don't get them on the table too quick. Let them just run down the tumble track, hit a springboard a few times. Let's get them getting a nice block. Let's not get them any fear.
That's great. And I definitely want to first start on maybe a sensitive subject for some people, is that I meet a lot of gymnasts who don't know how to run. And I think it's hilarious because we have a lot of people come to our facility and they've never been taught how to run. Their arms are all over the place. You know, their legs are flopping all over. And believe it or not, there's a good way to run. You know, there's like Olympic level sprinters sprint a certain way for a reason. And I feel like that's sometimes hard for coaches to understand, is that there's a specific way to run. So could you maybe chat a little bit more about why that's so important?
I think in terms of the pattern of movement, we've got a limited time and we can get from the top of the vault down to the bottom of the vault run. And we need to do it as like they're going to have an optimum run. Depend on the vault that they're going to do. Like, we've got some great runners over here. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Daniel Purvis, best runner in the world. He used to run with straight arms, but used to do an amazing 2.5. So an optimum run, it doesn't need to be sprinting as fast as they physically can. For me, as I said earlier, they have to be at the fastest pace 2 minutes before. Some people will say we've got a strength and conditioning coach that says you have to sprint from the top of it and then you're going to maintain that speed. I don't necessarily agree with that. As long as they're at their fastest by the springboard, I don't really mind where they are in the middle or at the top. You've got roundabout, for my sense of feeling, 6 steps to start to build onto that and be as fast as you physically can before you hit the bottom. We're going to encourage a long, low jump. So that's why I say around about 2 meters away from the springboard is going to be when they're at their fastest pace.
Like that.
Yeah. And then sometimes I think just us, we're inherent. We've always done it like this. But we need to like learn from these other sports. How do you run? Do you run on your toes? Do you run do you go heel turn? You have a nice gait going along. My gymnast Giarnni is not bad on vault. I'll have to mention that. But he did, when he was younger, run from side to side. He zigzagged across. So then we had to put like blocks there, and we had to learn. You know, I Googled so many running drills, putting bits of foam across the track. We started off 5 meters, and then 7 meters, and then 10 meters, and then 15 meters. And those things are great, especially if you're coming back from injury. Because if you understand the pattern of movement, where you need to be, and how long your stride is going to be, then that's great. If we ever look at videos from years and years ago when people are trying to do vault runs and their knees are up by their ears, that's not the best. That's not the quickest they are. They're lovely stag leaps, but we didn't really get down the vault that quick.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Right. I think the learning from other sports, I think running is probably the most a timely example of that. Right. There's very clear ways of how to get more power down the runway, and we should lean on those people. And the next thing that comes to mind for me is, with faster runs, with more power, I think that leads me to the conversation, whereas vault is one of the most terrifying things for young gymnasts, right? Because you're just sprinting as fast as you can at a stationary object, and then you have to flip and land. And I feel like I luckily was not as fearful. I was talking to Will about how high bar was my nemesis. I was terrified of dismounts, but vaulting was not that. Do you have athletes who really struggle with that fear aspect of that maximal amount of power going over the table?
Oh, massively, especially they don't throw their head up for a reason. They don't think, I'll look up at the ceiling. They're trying to see where they are. Sometimes they are too scared and they're looking around for everything. So what we try to do is, when they're younger, we try to build on that. So lots of running drills when they're going to run into a mat. They are going to run at an immovable object. So they need to try to make sure that they're happy for that. They don't normally they slow down when they get near a springboard. So we want to encourage that to speed up. So sprints, races into the pit, puts in a big block against the vault so they can run up the block and jump into the pit, time it, lots of games like that. That's always good. Not rushing these vaults. So as I said before, rather than putting them over a table at an early age, let them play on 2 springboards, let them play over a wedge or a pack slice or something without worrying anything else. Most of the mistakes we are going to see, I believe, are from the springboard. They've done this vault that many times, they understand how to pop off. But if they have the springboard that's too hard or too soft, or their steps are wrong and they try to take off more at the bottom of the vault, where they're used to being in the middle or maybe at the top if they're young, that's when the mistakes come along. So doing lots and lots of drills, lots and lots of preps, so they understand it, they know where they are. Lots of exercises, piled up mats. As I said before, like we've all seen people trying to get over a vault and they're too small for it. Give them time, let them grow.
I remember being at a clinic and I heard this quote. I forget who it was from, but essentially he was saying that 70% of the vault success is the run and hitting the board well. And people think it's the opposite, which is 70% is the flip, right? And I very much remember that pivotal moment of him saying, no, the flip is what happens, the first 2 pieces that people are missing out. So they'll do flip drills and twist drills, but they won't fix a run, fix a board tension. And then that's, it's like a reverse effect. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
That I completely agree. So in terms of it, there was in 2009 a World Championships, the O2, Gymnova changed the springboard and made them stronger. And everybody was wondering as to why they weren't doing that vault. It was nothing to do with the autonomy of getting off the vault in handstand. It was the run up and it was the springboards were that solid that they weren't giving away that much. So then they were leaning onto it. So for me, a good friend of mine, Nick Banton, used to say it's like stepping stones. If everything works out the way before, then when they get off the vault will be easy. And they've done that vault that many times, it's not a problem. But if they do jump too low on the springboard or miss that takeoff point or they've missed that block, then that's going to cause issues. But yeah, that's why I don't like to rush. Lots of running drills, lots of being able to take off long and low onto the board to get the best result. And then that will look after itself.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I'd be remiss not to ask about the steps themselves, right? Because I think a lot of coaches struggle with how many steps, are they closer, are they farther, where do they start? And I find some coaches like in the moment will just be like, we'll move 2 steps back with no rhyme or reason at all. And so how do you find someone's steps from a young age? Is it natural? Is it a set number in your head you're a goal for? Or?
If I'm honest, when they're really young, I try to get them to be able to do their vaults for 10 steps. So if they're going to do a run and a hurdle and a straight front into the pit, there's nothing like a good straight front for them to understand how not to lean forwards on the board, to take off, to drive the heels and everything else. Yeah. So I tried to do 10 steps and then I build on that going backwards. We know the maximum length of run that they're going to have. And I was doing a course last week and this guy said, we're talking about steps, and he was a pole vaulting coach. And he said to me, do you know that normally a running step is round about 15 steps? And I never knew that. So you learn something new every day. But when they say take 2 steps, like how big does your step need to be? I said earlier, like looking at when I was a kid, watching these people do these gigantic steps that weren't really getting anywhere. Their shoulders were backwards, their feet were in front. So that optimum step, the optimum length of that stride is key to it. Knowing what that is, striding it out. But yeah, when they're young, 10 steps, build on that and then get faster and faster and faster.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And then with that, if somebody gets grows, right, they're longer and they get a lot more powerful, do you have to adjust a little bit and recalculate that as they get maybe like from 10 to 15 years old, where now they're this fully grown human who's running a lot harder?
Definitely. I mean, I've listened to sometimes and I've watched these guys like grow up. Joe Fraser never used to be able to jump on the vault. We used to call him Bambi. And he's amazing now. But we used to look at it and all the time we're constantly figuring out, has he grown? Does he need to make his steps a little bit longer? Where does he need on the board? And it used to be a standard joke between me and his coach, Lee Walsh, where does he have it? Joe would say, oh, put it on 70. He doesn't have it on 70, Pete, put that 65. Right, put that 65. Was that on 70? Yeah. And then next week we come in, put it on 72.5. I'm like, what even is that? But do you want me to get a tape measure out and do it that precisely? But all the time, yeah, you're reevaluating it. How is it going to be? And then for me, just not rushing it. A great vaulting session for me. I don't believe you have to come in and do 20 volts. I think that, we're going to have a look at how many volts can they do before they get too tired. So we have a benchmark for that. And then what's the ratio like? So if that's 5 volts, and that's 5 volts. But a bit before is how do they warm up for that? And what do they do? Have they got some good just running drills when they run down? Do they run down and do they squat on? I love watching how people warm up. Do they go down and do they do a nice straight front over the table? Do they do a straight jump onto it from a short step? Going through some of our earlier competitions, we competed in the Youth Olympics against Nikita Giarnni. He was doing amazing drags and double fronts and everything else. So to watch how he was doing and how he was warming up in terms of just getting a springboard and from 3 steps at the back off the podium, 3 steps double front, half out. That's amazing. It's great to watch these guys, but all the time you're consistently, let's try this. Let's see if we can move that step back. But without even worrying about, can he do a double twist in Kaz? Is he brave enough? And is his run right for him just to do a straight front over the table?
I'm really happy you mentioned that point about not just doing 20 vaults, because I think that's common practice here. Sometimes I see a lot of gyms that just do 10 vaults a night because we do 10 vaults a night and that's the way to do it. But like vault is brutal, man. Vault is such a high force thing and it goes with so much strain on your body, particularly when you have kids that are like 8 to 12 years old, 14 years old. They're not fully developed yet, right? So all it takes is one of those landings to make an ankle not feel awesome. And I just worry about sometimes people just hear 10 vaults is 10 vaults because it's 10 vaults. And there's no rhyme or reason about that. And I feel like longevity wise, that's not great.
Definitely isn't. So in terms of like, how do they know 10 is too much or too little? You might have some people that are made for vault and they love doing vaults. And some people like doing pommels and some people hate doing pommels. But everybody needs to be treated slightly differently. So if we've got a benchmark as to how many can he do, how many landings can he do? I mean, vault, to me, vault is vault. So maybe what's wrong with doing 5 vaults and then doing double fronts off the trampoline into a pit, double front and half out, ready for our drag and our handspring front. So there needs to be a reason as to why you've said 10. And it can't just be because I listened to this guy last year and he told me I need to do 10. Have a benchmark. How many times can he sprint down there before he starts to get tired and his run up then turns slow and then he can't get off the springboard quick enough?
Or on that point, because we have 45 minutes on the clock for this rotation and I got to fill 45 minutes. That's not a good one either. Okay, so I love this conversation, and I think the next natural progression is vault is very unlike other events where you have 35 skills you can work on and ideas. So I'm curious about what you would maybe do with younger gymnasts in particular who the attention span's low, the monotony is high. It's really not the most exciting thing to do front handspring, or timer. I know a lot of younger coaches struggle with the younger boys.
I like to try to mix it up a little bit, if I'm honest. In terms of vault, and it is one of my favorite pieces. I understand it. I hope quite well, but I only actually vault maybe 2 times a week, maybe 3 times maximum. So for me, as long as in a session they do the key points, which is going to be a high bar, which is going to be pommel and some sort of acrobatics every session. If we don't hit vault in a session, then we'll do lots of stuff on trampoline. We'll play games. We'll do some landings. We'll do some stuff into the pit. But I don't believe that they have to go down every single time. And mixing it up, maybe playing games, doing something different, is going to, encourage them to, continually love this sport for a start and not get bored of it. And how many times can you do a handstand flat back before you go, I don't want to do it anymore?
So true. Vivid memories of myself just being bored out of my mind. That's why I'm laughing so hard. So with this, I guess the next progression of this would be, I think vault, given what we talked about with really high forces and really high risk, is a lot of coaches don't really know when, hard is okay or when competition's okay. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts around, this looks pretty good. I know a couple of coaches are like, we have to do it to a certain level above the floor before I feel comfortable putting it on a hard surface. Do you have any rules of thumb like that or no?
I can't. I do and I don't. For my thinking behind it all is we have to have 2 mats above the height of the ground, so 1 more mat higher than competition if we're going to add on an extra half turn. So if they're going to do a full twisting Kaz, if they want to do 1.5, then rather than say let's do 20 in the session, can they do it onto a softer mat? Can they go higher? That then gives them enough time to wrap in that extra half twist rather than anything else. I think that we rush quite a lot of the time from the pitch stage to the comp stage. Once again, for me, it's like if they can do that and we've had that slow, gradual build up and they've done it into the pit and then we've put a soft mat in and it's a bit of a firmer mat. Try to be clever with your coaching. Can you turn the mats the other way up? The competition mat, so it's got the soft side onto the hard mat. How many times are they doing that before you then say, right, let's go at it. Let's go at competition level. I think that if that's rushed and there's one mistake, there's one injury, then you're going back 6 months. So to build all those things up to then get from that competition stage is quite key. Sometimes we forget about the psychology behind all of it. especially if it's a competition they haven't done it before. So a few times we've actually turned up, something that I learned from Barry Colliers. You turn up, you do your warm-up, you actually warm up in the back gym, or maybe you do it, but you don't actually compete it. So you're actually getting used to it. You know what you're going to do. You know that you're confident enough to do that vault, and then you do something a little bit easier. And that's, for me, a major step. I think quite a lot of time we miss. We go into these things, like Europeans, when the Giarnni done triple pike on floor, and everyone's, oh my God, is he going to do it? He'd done it in the warm-up, and then he probably didn't really feel like he needed to do it. He wanted it in the go, so he'd done it, but he's probably not going to do it again. So he's been through that psychological stage of to get it from mat into pre-comp into comp into then I've done it and I'm easing off. So the putting 2 mats down is great, and it's now high enough, brilliant. But it's still that stage when you're by yourself at the bottom of a vault run, and you've still got to attack it with 100% commitment. So that's the bit that I'm more I tend to spend more time on.
Yeah, and I've never actually heard that little tip that you just mentioned, which is like, warming something up at a competition setting, but not actually competing the full difficulty. What a brilliant way to, expose someone to a little bit more stress, a little bit new equipment, new place. You got to travel, you got to warm up on different equipment, but, you can still get that little bit, but not the full thing. That's a great way to, rehearse these things. But then when time comes, when a judge is on you, it's only you. Maybe the meet's rotating a lot slower. You sat for 20 minutes when you weren't ready for it, and you don't have to do the full thing. That's a great plan going into it. Knowing we're going to warm this up, but do, just a full or something like that. I love that.
Yeah, that's it. It just takes some of the intensity away from it. But I mean, if you put it onto another piece, if it was like a double on floor for the first time, actually do it in a podium session. That's a great step, and let's move forwards. And the stuff you highlight there is great. We sometimes don't factor in our pre-comps or our control training that you're going to sit there for 20 minutes while somebody else has it. So what are you going to do? Maybe that's not ready. Maybe the P-bar broke something. So all the time you have to do it. I quite like, in terms of thinking about it, the mental stage of it, like stop in the gym. If you've got that power and you don't mind, and everybody's in it to help everybody out, stop the gym, get guys to come over and watch, put him under that little bit of pressure, because him being able to do that vault is great. But when he's being stared at, when the judge is there, when other people are there, then that's a completely different matter.
Totally changes everything. And I think the last piece I want to naturally go to on this concept of adding halves is I think vault is an all too common piece where the twisties creep up quite a bit. You're going from a half to a full to 1.5, and all of a sudden you get someone who blocks and is lost, and now they're completely up their different way. And I feel like unfortunately sometimes it gets like we'll figure it out, we'll do more, and I don't know if that's the solution. I don't know if that's the best way forward. So have you dealt with someone who has too many twisties or?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of it, quite a lot of time we used to get it out on floor. Somebody would come down, especially boys being boys. Somebody's about to run down and do a straight front, somebody would go twist, and they'll do a half turn out or something. For me, it's about how you're going to go backwards and then build up from that. I don't think doing more and more is the way forward. I don't think that helps. Sometimes, in fact, it actually gets worse. So there are ways of getting out of it. For me, if we're on floor and they've got the twisties and they can't do a tuck front, I ask them to do a dive roll. And 9 out of 10 times that's worked well for me. And you're going to do a dive roll and you get higher, and you're going to set your expectations quite low. That's not a one session. It's going to change. On vault, quite a lot of the time, over here we call it lost in space. But they hit the table, and then that's much of a desire to do the vault. They throw their head out. They just see stars, and then they're all of a sudden on the floor. So where is it going wrong for them? It should be quite visual. For me, when they block off the table, they should be looking towards the end of the vault run, and then everything is visual. From when they come through, they see the pit, or they see the track, and then they're looking at the back of the vault. So those key things, are you seeing this when you actually do that vault or that tumble? Some people don't see it. I mean, like my gymnast Giarnni, we were talking once about when you catch a Coleman, so like a Kovac with a full twist on high bar, and we were doing it for ages, and you could do it really easy. And we're building up to 2016 Olympics, and we said, well, it's the same as when you do your triple double on the floor. What do you see then? He said, I don't know. I shut my eyes.
Oh, God.
It's different. And he'd done it, and he competed. First junior, I believe, in the world to compete triple double on 2016. But like, what do you do? Like, some people hear things, and they hear the rattle off the chain, or they hear the top, or something else. Some people see things. Some people can just automatically feel it. Giarnni can just feel it. He knows where he is in the air, and that's amazing. But we can't teach that to that kid the same as what we can do to another one. They're all different people. They all have to do it. My old martial arts instructor used to say, you've got a padlock, it's best to have 10 keys, and then you'll always be able to open up. Rather than just saying you've got this one technique and you've got this one thing, go at it. Having lots of different techniques to go around those things are great.
That's great. And I think something you mentioned earlier too was the opportunity to use trampoline and softer surfaces. There's so much training equipment that you can put into a pit, you can put into a softer surface where you can slow it down and see, where am I looking? What do I see? Is it the pit? Is it the ground? Is it the end of the table? I think there's a lot, you can get 100 reps there, just like softer surfaces and nice and easy.
Yeah, definitely. Or even things like if you've got to do vaults and you really do want this magical number of 10, then why don't you just give them a trampette? Give them a trampette and lower the table so they actually have to attack it and they have to get their hands down quicker so they don't miss that takeoff point. So there's lots of training aids that we can use. Just research. It's easier now than what it used to be years ago. It's quite hard to find it. Now you can just jump on YouTube or onto the Shift show and you can have a look and see what they all are.
Cheers. I appreciate the shameless plug there. So to wrap things up here, I think it's best just to maybe share what's coming for. I think you have 2 lectures we're going to do for the symposium, and maybe just add on the vault one and what people can expect and kind of what to learn from you.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to actually. So I've got 2 lectures. So 2 of my favorite pieces. So we've got Kazamatsu on vault. So on that, we're going to learn what is a Kazamatsu. There's different ways, different people. I'm lucky enough to have the world and seen different people coach it a different way. Some people teach it as a side, some teach it forward, some people backwards. So understanding the actual technique or different techniques, so we can go on to a few different people. So that's going to be great on vault. How to get from just basics to the final skill. It's going to be awesome. And then we've got P-bars, and I've got Stutz and Diamondov. So all of the stuff that's come up into quite high level. We teach these quite a lot of the time. I think when gymnasts are around about 12 to 13. So yeah, I'm going to share some preps. Rather than just doing the whole skill globally, we're going to break it down so we can do it sequentially. Some preps on the floor, using trampoline as an aid, and then leading up to the final skill.
It's amazing. I can't wait. I'm spoiled because I get to see a lot of these things before anybody else does, and I'm excited. I love that we have a lot of really amazing men's speakers. Yourself, Luke, Will, really high class people, and I'm excited to unleash that to the world.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to watching the others as well.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's tough because that day has a women's and a men's room, and I always want to jump back and forth between both to see. But everything's recorded, so you can find anything you want after the fact.
Yeah, it'd be cool.
All right. Well, this is great. I really appreciate this little short step. I know you got lots of places to go. You're probably running off the coach right now, so I appreciate your time, Pete, and I'm really looking forward to the next couple steps here in the symposium.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be cool.
All right, we'll catch up soon. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Cheers.
All right, cheers.